Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Before Coffee. Can't believe it's already the end of the week. Wonder what's happening out there.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Back in my studio.
your epic studio.
Very warm here.
It is cold for me here. Some people may agree that it's cold, but for me it's cold.
Accordingly, I'm not wearing any clothes, so I'm dressed.
I'm cold with clothes on. That's the worst part.
You don't need none of that. Let me organize my deal here. Organize my deal.
Organize your deal.
Let me open some news stories. Ready?
Is that how you're going to look?
Why do I look like shit?
No. I mean, are you going to sit like that?
No.
Okay. That's
How's
better.
that?
All right. I wasn't sure if that was the shot you're going to go for.
No, I'm not comfortable, so no. It's sweaty and sticky in here. That's all I can say in my defense. That's why my hair looks like that. All right. It's the wet head look.
The wet head look.
That's right. Ready for you, Chief.
Today on Before Coffee, Wagner boss Prigozhin has returned to Russia, Lukashenko says.
The world's hottest day on record was Tuesday, scientists calculate.
Germany did not listen to warnings about Russia, says Annalena Baerbock.
And we talk about Turkey and Sweden and their attempt to get in NATO. Well, Sweden's attempt.
EU sets out first ever soil law to protect food security and slow global heating.
U.S. is destroying the last of its once vast chemical weapons arsenal. That and more stories today on July 6, 2023 edition of Before Coffee.
Okay, let's go to our first news story of the day, which is, of course, about the Wagner Group. This is from Peter Sauer on The Guardian. The Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, who last month brokered a deal to end Wagner's armed mutiny, has said the head of the mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has returned to Russia. As for Prigozhin, he is in St. Petersburg. He is not on the territory of Belarus, Lukashenko told reporters. Where's Prigozhin this morning? Maybe he left for Moscow. Lukashenko said Wagner fighters were stationed at their camps in Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine, adding that his offer to host them in Belarus remained. Under a deal brokered by Lukashenko, Prigozhin abandoned what he called a march for justice by thousands of his recruits on Moscow in exchange for safe passage to exile in Belarus. Criminal charges against Prigozhin were dropped last week as part of an agreement. Prigozhin, is a 62-year-old former convict who rose to become Russia's most powerful mercenary, was last seen in public when he left Rostov-on-Don, a city in southern Russia that his troops occupied briefly. There were already questions about whether Prigozhin was sticking to the terms of the deal. The warlord has not been photographed in Belarus, and Prigozhin's jet has flown between Belarus and Moscow and St. Petersburg several times, fueling speculation about the warlord's whereabouts. Nobody's seen him, but they're supposedly somewhere. Okay. Begun Telegram messaging app on Monday for the second time since he aborted a rebellion. Prigozhin thanks supporters inside Russia. Today, we need your support more than ever, he said, promising new victories at the front in the near future. Lukashenko said on Thursday that Putin would not wipe out Prigozhin because the Russian president was not malevolent and vindictive. The Belarusian dictator said he planned to discuss the future of Wagner during an upcoming meeting with Putin. I love that kind of backhand there, right? Lukashenko said this: he's not malevolent and dictated. that dictator said. You know, freaking, just suddenly, I know he's a dictator, but it's just an interesting thing you can notice there in the writing of this story. Meanwhile, Russian state media on Wednesday launched a fierce attack on Prigozhin as part of the Kremlin's efforts to discredit him in the eyes of the Russian public. Rossiya 1 TV channel aired what it said was exclusive footage shot during an FSB security service raid on Prigozhin's private estate in St. Petersburg. The FSB said it found weapons, gold bars, and a closet full of wigs at the opulent mansion. Not wigs, isn't he bald? Yeah, he's bald. Of course he has wigs. What?
Disguises, man. You need disguises.
Yeah, look at him. He's like, yeah. Well, you guys can't look at him, but trust me, he is very bald. Okay. Of course he has some wigs. No problem. Yeah. The pro-Kremlin newspaper Izvestia also published footage of the raid, showing a giant sledgehammer described with the words "for use in important negotiations" displayed in one of the rooms. Last week, Moscow began dismantling Prigozhin's corporate empire, closing down some of his media assets. So, they're taking the hardball with him, and he's supposedly still living and hasn't been thrown out of a giant building yet, according to everyone. So, we'll find out next week, I guess, what really happened.
Keeping his feet on the ground. They keep reaching for the stars, like Casey used to say.
It's
all
your
right, is that the story?
Yeah.
All right, then. And climate news. More climate news from...
More?
What's that?
Your camera's not centered.
My camera's not centered?
Yeah, I'm seeing too much of... Yeah, there you go.
This better?
Yeah.
I see myself. I'm looking at the stories. All right, the world's hottest day on record in our hot planet. Now I gotta move my head. The entire planet... This is from PBS News. The entire planet sweltered an unofficial hottest day on human record keeping on July 3rd and then blasted past that with an even hotter day on July 4th. According to the University of Maine scientists at the Climate Reanalyzer Project, for 2 straight days the global average temperature spiked into uncharted territory. After scientists talked about Monday's dramatic heat, Tuesday soared 0.17 degrees or 0.31 degrees Fahrenheit, even hotter, which is a huge temperature jump in terms of global average and records. The same University of Maine climate calculator, based on satellite data and computer simulations, forecasts a similar temperature for Wednesday that would be a record territory, with the Antarctica average that is a whopping 4.5 degrees Celsius or 8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the 1979 to 2000 average. High temperature records were surpassed July 3rd and 4th in Quebec and northwestern Canada and Peru. Cities across the U.S. from Medford, Oregon to Tampa, Florida have been hovering at all-time highs, says Zach Taylor, a meteorologist with National Weather Service. Beijing reported 9 straight days last week when the temperature exceeded 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 Fahrenheit. We're going to do this the whole story, by the way. Keep converting. The increasing heating of our planet caused by fossil fuel use is not expected. It was predicted already in the 19th century, after all, said climate scientist Stefan Ramstorff at Potsdam Institute for Climate Research in Germany. But it is dangerous for us humans and for the ecosystem we depend on. We need to stop it fast. The daily but preliminary unofficial heat record comes after months of truly unreal meteorology and climate stats for the year, such as off-the-chart record warmth in the North Atlantic, record low sea ice in Antarctica, and rapidly strengthening El Nino, said the University of Oklahoma meteorology professor Jason Furtado. The global record is not quite the same. The global record is not quite the type regularly used by gold standard climate measure entities like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, but it is an indication that the climate change is reaching into uncharted territory. It legitimately captures global scale heating, and NOAA will take these figures into consideration when it does its official record calculations, said Deke Arndt. My name is Deke Arndt, director of the National Center for the Environmental Information. In the climate assessment community, I don't think we'd assign the kind of gravitas to a single-day observation as we would to a month or year, Arndt said. Scientists generally use much longer measurements, months, years, decades, to track Earth's warming. In addition, the preliminary record for the hottest days based on data that only goes back to 1979, the start of the satellite keeping record, whereas NOAA's data goes back to 1880. But Arndt added that we wouldn't be seeing anywhere near record warm days unless we were in a warm piece of what will likely be a warm era, driven by greenhouse gas emissions and the onset of a robust El Nino. An El Nino is a temporary natural warming of parts of the central Pacific Ocean that changes the weather worldwide and generally makes the planet hotter. Human-caused climate change is like an upward escalator of global temperatures, and El Nino is like jumping up while standing on that escalator, Arndt said. Interesting. On Tuesday, American Independence Day, Earth average temperature spiked at 17.8 degrees Celsius or 62.9 Fahrenheit, according to the University of Maine's Climate Real Analyzer, a common tool often used by climate scientists for a good glimpse of the world's condition. Tuesday's temperature was nearly a full degree Celsius warmer than the 1979-2000 average, which itself is warmer than the 20th and 19th century averages. So, another update on our hot planet. Make sure you stay cool, stay hydrated, and get enough sleep, unlike me. Your story.
Yep. Always remember to drink that water. Okay.
Yeah, That's it.
Okay. In Germany news, this is from Patrick Wintour, the diplomatic editor at The Guardian. Germany did not listen to warnings about Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has changed how Germany views security and made Berlin realize it failed to listen to Eastern European allies who warned of threats from Moscow. Yeah, they were probably just like, "Aw, man, those Eastern Europeans always screaming about Russia because of the Soviet Union." No, guys, I'm for real, something's happening over here. In a frank admission about the flaws in the post-war German foreign policy, Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, said countries in the Eastern Europe had the right to warn Germany that hoping for the best in dealing with the threats from an autocratic Russia was not an adequate response. For too long, she said, Germany has resorted to checkbook diplomacy or belief that political and economic interaction would lead Russia to a democratic path. We know that for the foreseeable future, President Putin's Russia will remain a threat to peace and security on our continent, and that we have to organize our security against Putin's Russia, not with it, she said. Writing before NATO summit in Vilnius and soon after the publication of the new German national security strategy, she intertwined Germany's security interests with those of Eastern Europe, saying, "We Germans will never forget that we owe our freedom in a united country also to our allies and our eastern neighbors. Just as they were there for us, we will be there for them now, because the security of Eastern Europe is German security." There had been doubts about whether Germany could take a military leadership role in Europe given its history, but Baerbock said that the Ukraine war has forced Germany, sometimes to its own surprise, to reassess its role and responsibilities. After the horrors of the Second World War, unleashed by Germans, our country's foreign policy was driven by the premise that war should never again emanate from German soil. She was clear that had changed. Only 2 years ago, the idea of Germany delivering tanks, air defense system, and howitzers to a war zone would have seemed far-fetched, to say the least. Today, Germany is one of the leading arms suppliers for Ukraine's self-defense. He added, Russia's war of aggression has marked a rupture in the world. For my country, it has opened a new chapter, redefining how we seek to promote peace, freedom, and sustainability in this world, as a partner that embraces its leadership. Baerbock's efforts since her appointment to reassure Eastern Europe have been hampered by a Polish government intent on seeking reparations for Germany's wartime occupation of Poland. Relations with Hungary have suffered as a result of German criticism of Hungary's democratic backsliding. There is a general admission by France and Germany that the axis of new geopolitical Europe will be closer to the east. In her article, Bearlock has also pointed to the speed with which Germany had shed its economic links with Russia, noting that the contribution of Russian fossil fuel to the current German energy mix was zero. Although Germany's new security strategy, modeled conceptually on Britain's integrated defense review, has been criticized for fudging some issues, including the need for a National Security Council, the author had to deal with different ideologies and departmental interests from a coalition government. One author confided, "Behind every scene, there is a story." Strategy came under most criticism for deferring a debate on how to handle China to a later paper. And differences remain about the best way to implement the mantra that Germany needed to de-risk rather than decouple its economical relations with China. Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor, drew criticism last week when he said de-risking was primarily down to the choice of companies and not down to governments. De-risking is not a short-term project, and as it is mainly about decisions that need to be taken by companies, he told reporters after a 2-day EU summit in Brussels. He said companies too often had taken major risks as they choose to rely on only one supplier, no matter where it is. So that was a short little summary of, I'm sure, a much bigger article by the German foreign minister about why Germany may or may not have let Eastern Europe down and itself down.
Oh man.
Okay, on to your story.
And more European news. We're going to talk about NATO again. This is from the AP story from what's this fella's name? Lauren Cook, probably a woman. Lauren Cook. This story. Senior officials from Sweden and Turkey will gather at NATO headquarters on Thursdays to examine Turkish President Erdogan's objections to Nordic country joining the military alliance to see what more, if anything, can be done to break the deadlock. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg will lead the meeting, which will involve the country's foreign ministers, intelligence chiefs, and national security advisors. Top officials from Finland, which joined NATO in April after addressing Turkish concerns, will also take part. Fearing for their security, Sweden and neighboring Finland ended their long-standing policy of military non-alignment after Russia invaded Ukraine on February 2022, and both applied for NATO membership. President Joe Biden welcomed Sweden's Prime Minister to the White House on Wednesday to show his solidarity as the United States ramped up pressure for the Nordic nations' entry into NATO ahead of the alliance's 2-day summit starting next Tuesday. Only Turkey and Hungary are delaying Sweden's membership. The other 29 allies, Stoltenberg and Sweden, have all said Nordic country has done enough to satisfy. They keep calling it the Nordic country. Turkey's demands. Sweden has changed its anti-terror laws and lifted an arms embargo on Turkey, according to other concessions. But Turkey accuses Sweden of being too lenient towards groups that Ankara says pose a security threat, including militant Kurdish groups and people associated with the 2016 coup attempt. NATO requires unanimous approval of all 31 members to expand. Turkey's foreign minister said sides would review steps Finland and Sweden took, especially in the context of fighting terrorism, since the last meeting, which was held on Ankara on June 14th. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan would be joined at the meetings by Erdogan's chief advisor Akaf Karagekilik, Deputy Foreign Minister Barak Akapar, and Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin, according to the ministry's statement. Hungary is also holding up approval of Sweden's candidacy, but has never clearly stated publicly what its concerns are. NATO officials expect that Hungary will follow suit once Turkey lifts its objections. At a European Union summit last week, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said Hungary has given assurances that would not hold things up. Twice I have spoken to Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Kristersson told reporters. Both times he has confirmed that Hungary will not delay. Turkey is a different matter. A Koran burning protest, which was the media vastly outnumbered the participants outside a mosque in Stockholm, has fueled tensions. Erdogan criticized Sweden last week for allowing it. "Oh no, you allow free speech, you dirty bastards." Police permitted the protest, citing freedom of speech after a court overturned a ban of similar burning a Muslim holy book. It is unclear exactly what Turkey objects to, said Thursday's meeting designed to flesh that out. Erdogan's rally against Sweden while on the campaign trail for elections in May, and NATO officials expected him to relent after he was reelected. Erdogan is seeking an upgraded F-16 fighter jets from the U.S., but Biden has suggested that Sweden's membership should be endorsed first. NATO has hoped the road to Sweden's membership will be smoothed out before the July 11-12 summit in Lithuania. Sweden's entry would be a symbolically powerful moment and the latest indication that Russia war is driving countries to join the alliance. Those hopes have dimmed. Well, I think they'll eventually join. And Erdogan was running for re-election and he was grabbing an issue. That's all I think. Even though he probably rigged the election anyway.
Well,
your story.
Okay.
I don't see a dime's worth of difference between Sweden and Finland joining. I really don't. They're just, countries that need NATO protection because Russians are going to say, you know what, Finland's looking pretty good. Yeah, your story. Sorry.
Okay. In more European news, we've got global heating. This is an article from Patrick Greensfield on The Guardian with the help of theguardian.org, who's supporting not the age of extinction. It says the age of extinction is supported by. I'm like, no, we don't need to support that. We need to do the opposite to support it. Anyways, the European Commission has proposed the continent's first soil law intended to undo some of the damages done by the intensive farming and mitigate global heating. Amid the intense opposition of proposed laws on nature restoration and curbs on pesticide, the European Commission put forward proposals in Brussels on Wednesday to revive degraded soils. Research indicates that this could help absorb carbon from the atmosphere and ensure sustainable food production. The new law would see member states monitor the health of soils, fertilizer use, and erosion, but stopped short of country-level targets for improving soil quality. This drew criticism from European agri-food industry, which called for more ambition to improve the worrying state of soils. Speaking to The Guardian, the EU Environment Commissioner, Virginijus Sinkevicius, said the ultimate aim was for the continent to have healthy soils by 2050. More than 60% of EU soils are considered to be in a unhealthy state. If our soils continue to degrade, the biggest risk to our food security and farmers, it's our biggest risk to our food security and farmers. Basically, their business model is wiped out. Oh, see, it always comes down to economics. Oh, but what about the money that could be made?
Nah.
What about just take care of the planet? Who cares about the money that can be made? What a concept. I can hardly imagine how we could do agriculture without fertile soil. The worst effects of droughts and floods can be avoided with healthier soils. Well, technically you can do, hydro agriculture. You just put it in the water. You don't even just feed it the right nutrients in the water. You don't need soil, but I get what they're saying.
Some foods.
Yeah. A new law would not have legally binding targets, however. We are opening a way to additional income opportunities for farmers and landowners through a volunteer certification scheme for soil health and strong synergies with carbon farming and paying for ecosystem services. Land use is the second major source of greenhouse gas emissions after fossil fuels and a major cause of biodiversity loss, with overuse of fertilizers and peatland degradation a driver of both crises. Research released earlier this week indicated that modest improvements to agricultural soils around the world might store enough carbon to keep the world within 1.5 G or 1.5 Celsius of global heating. One Planet Business for Biodiversity, OP2B, the main representative of European agri-food industry in Brussels, said the proposals did not go far enough. The EU needs to go further to tackle the trend of deteriorating soil health in Europe, said Stefani Avazzini in a statement, the director of the OP2B. The organization is calling on EU member states and the European Parliament to raise the ambition of the proposals. We very much value the importance of the Commission gives to agriculture and its central role in the management of soil, Still, we would have appreciated the Commission grasping the magnitude of the efforts needed to move to sustainable management practices, mobilizing the necessary funds to support the transition to regenerative agriculture at a scale. So, find more Age of Extinction coverage on The Guardian. And I don't know why they're supporting it, but The Guardian is supporting the Age of Extinction, so...
Oh yeah, they want us all extinct. Well, everybody's got a point of view, right? Even
right.
crazy people. All right, so the U.S. is destroying the last of its once vast chemical weapons arsenal. This is from the New York Times, Dave Phillips and John Ismay. In a sealed room behind a gauntlet of armed guards and 3 rows of high barbed wire at the Army's Pueblo Chemical Depot in Colorado, a team of robotic arms was busily disassembling some of the last of the United States' vast and ghastly stockpile of chemical weapons. In went artillery shells filled with deadly mustard agent that the Army had been storing for more than 70 years. The bright yellow robots pierced, drained, and washed each shell, then baked it at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. Out came inert and harmless scrap metal falling off the conveyor belt into an ordinary brown dumpster with a resounding clank. The sound of chemical weapons dying, said Kingston Reef, who spent years pushing for disarmament outside government and is now a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Threat Reduction and Arms Control. He smiled at another shell clanked into the dumpster. The destruction of the stockpile has taken decades, and the Army says the work is just about finished. The depot near Pueblo destroyed its last weapon in June. The remaining handful at another depot in Kentucky will be destroyed in the next few days. And when they are all gone, all of the world's publicly declared chemical weapons will have been eliminated. The American stockpile, built up over generations, was shocking in its scale. Cluster bombs and landmines filled with nerve agent, artillery shells that could blanket whole forests with blistering mustard fog, tanks full of poison that could be loaded on jets and sprayed on targets below. They were the class of weapons deemed so inhumane that their use was condemned after World War I. But even so, the United States and other powers continued to develop and harness them and amass them. Some held deadlier versions of the chlorine and mustard gas agents made infamous in the trenches of the Western Front. Others held nerve agents developed later like VX and sarin. They're lethal even in tiny quantities. American armed forces are not known to have used lethal chemical weapons in a battle since 1918, though during Vietnam they used herbicides like Agent Orange that were harmful to humans. But nerve agent and Agent Orange, same thing. Nerve agent is instant, and Agent Orange just give you cancer 50 years later. The United States was also a sprawling germ warfare and biological weapons program. Those weapons were destroyed in the 1970s. The United States and the Soviet Union agreed in principle in 1989 to destroy their chemical weapons stockpile, and when the Senate ratified the Chemical Weapons Convention in 1997, the United States and other signatories committed to getting rid of the chemical weapons once and for all. But destroying them has not been easy. They were built to be fired, not disassembled. The combination of explosives and poisons makes them exceptionally dangerous to handle. The Department of Defense officials once projected that the job could be done in a few years at a cost of $1.4 billion, and is now wrapping up decades behind schedule at costs of close to $42 billion, or 2,900% over budget. But it's done. It's done. It's been an ordeal, that's for sure. I wondered if I'd ever see the day, said Craig Williams, who started pushing for the safety destruction of the stockpile in 1984 when he learned that the Army was storing tons of chemical weapons 5 miles from his house at Bluegrass Army Depot in Richmond, Kentucky. He's a NIMBY, not in my backyard. We had to fight, and it took a long time, but I think we should be very proud of, he said. This is the first time globally that an entire class of weapons of mass destruction will be destroyed. Other powers have also destroyed declared stockpiles, Britain in 2007, India in 2009, and Russia in 2017. But Pentagon officials have cautioned that chemical weapons have not been eradicated entirely. A few nations signed the treaty and some never signed the treaty, and some that did, notably Russia. appear to have retained undeclared stocks. What a shock. Russia cheating at an arms treaty. No way. Nor did they treaty end the use of chemical weapons like by rogue states and terrorist groups. Forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad, Syria used chemical weapons in the country numerous times between 2013 and 2019. According to the IHS Conflict Monitor, a London-based intelligence collection analysis service, fighters from the Islamic State used chemical weapons at least 62 times in Iraq and Syria from 2014 to 2016. The immense American stockpile and decades-long effort to dispose of it are both a monument to human folly and testament to human potential, people involved say. The job took so long in part because citizens and lawmakers insisted that the work be done without endangering surrounding communities. Late in July, the 15,000-acre Bluegrass Depot, workers carefully pulled fiberglass tripping tubes holding sarin-filled rockets out of earth-covered concrete storage bunkers and drove them into a series of buildings for processing. Workers inside wearing protective suits, gloves, x-ray tubes to see if the warheads inside were leaking, then sent them down the conveyor to meet their doom. It was the last time humans would ever handle the weapons. From there, robots did the rest. Chemical munitions all share essentially the same design, a thin-walled warhead filled with liquid agent and a small explosive charge that bursted open into a battlefield, leaving a spray of small droplets, mist and vapor, the poison gas that soldiers had feared from the Somme to the Tigris. For generations, American military vowed to use chemical weapons only in response to enemy chemical attack and then set out to amass so many that no enemy would dare. By the 1960s, the United States had a highly secret network of manufacturing plants and storage complexes around the globe. So here we are, and there is way more paragraphs to this story than there probably is necessary. But there's your story. Chemical weapons, at least from superpowers, a thing in the past. But we still have to worry about terrorists having them, because they're not that hard to make. Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. In culture news, what are summer flopbusters? And why did Indiana Jones and the Flash bomb at the box office? This is from Ryan Gilby in The Guardian. It is thought that Antikytherian mechanism, or banded the Dial of Destiny, is the last Indiana Jones movie. Was a device invented by the ancient Greeks to predict ellipses and monitor the movement of the sun. Whether its prescience can be applied to box office takings isn't known. Some estimate the date the contraption to as early as 200 BC, where there was a dismaying lack of interest in domestic grosses in opening weekends. But if it could, it would have revealed that Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny was headed for a full-on Temple of Doom scenario. If you want to imagine what the studio executives looked like when they received word of the dismal grosses for the $300 million or £235 movie, cast your mind back to the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, eyes popping, faces melting, and that sort of thing. Tentpole releases, as summer blockbusters are known, are no longer the guaranteed behemoths they were in pre-COVID era. The marquee is sagging, the tentpole is in danger of snapping. Last month, the DC superhero adventure, The Flash, took a catastrophic dive into the red and now on course to become one of the biggest flops in Warner Bros. History. Wow. Expectations were high for the movie, though maybe there should have been a shade more skepticism when James Gunn, co-CEO of DC Studios, announced that it was one of the best superhero movies he'd seen. Never trust anyone when they say that. This is the best thing you'll ever see. Okay, you're lying to my face. As scoops go, executive claims his company's product better than everyone else's. Wow, lacks a certain rigor, not to mention a novelty value. It transpired that Gunn was firing blanks. Reviews ranged from lukewarm to frosty, while audience sprinted at flash-like speeds in the opposite direction from the cinema, showing the movie showings to the movie. Less than a month after its release, it is already in the pan, and there's little hope that either the movie or the Dial of Destiny will make up lost ground in the summer holidays. What will the triple threat of Barbie, Oppenheimer, and new Mission Impossible adventuring waiting in the wings? What could have gone so disastrously wrong for these apparently safe bets? In the case of Dial of Destiny, it is almost as if depending on the sustained affection of an older, nostalgic, and largely male audience, rather than including anything that could entice a younger, diverse demographic, had proved a flawed strategy. But wait! Doesn't the Phoebe Waller-Bridge factor count for anything? She appears as an indie goddaughter, though it's worth remembering that, as a film performer, she doesn't have the clout to match her TV presence, or cultural standing. That will be a hard lesson for some of us to learn, but the world isn't made of Fleabag fans. Importing into Indiana Jones' picture a scaled-down version of her usual shtick feels incordious. Waller-Bridge has worked splendidly as Magic Dust, Spriggle in a Bond film, or a Star Wars prequel, but there's no evidence in movies that she can be a magic wand and make miracles happen. Other elements that might have been off-putting to audiences include the de-aging technology that shaves a few decades and several layers of human emotion from Harrison Ford's face. And look who he's fighting this time, Nazis. Don't we see enough of those on Twitter?
Oh, come on.
That's an easy joke. The reason for the crash of the Flash are less mysterious. You might blame the curse of the multiverse, which makes the exploits of different versions of the film's heroes seem less compelling than they would have been before this scenario started dominating everything and everywhere all at once. Haha, get it? The movie Everything Everywhere All at Once is a multiverse film, and now everyone's making multiverse films. This guy's what a writer. Perhaps there is a reality in which the allure of the multiverse is not waning, but this isn't it. A double helping of Batman in The Flash was also predicted to be a winner. Surely no one could resist seeing both Michael Keaton, who played the role twice more than 30 years ago, and Ben Affleck, the first actor in history of the part to look more expressive with his mask off than on. Oh, sorry, his mask on than off. He is more expressive when his mask is on. Okay, sorry. Messed up that joke. The rule with this superhero, though, seems to be that only works now in a brain-swept gothic context. That explains why the Batman was a 770 million hit last year, while the character's lighthearted appearance in The Flash, riding the coattails of Spider-Man Get Together and No Way Home, was as appetizing as a Wuhan bat trap. Wow, that's a really specific attack there.
Jeez.
Nothing was more damaging to The Flash, though, than the assorted allegations regarding off-screen behavior by its star Ezra Miller. They're not allegations, by the way. He was arrested, and trialed for them, which has made the movie synonymous with the scandal. Audience looking to forget their cares at the multiplex don't want to do heavy lifting of seeing past the actor's dubious extracurricular action any more than they want to pick broken glass out of their popcorn. You don't need a Dial of Destiny to tell you that. He was in Hawaii just harassing Hawaiians, right? Nobody likes to hear about some, tourist going somewhere and just harassing the people who live there. That nobody wants to hear about that. And you're also a famous actor. Just leave and go away.
That's
Get
a
a
different
hobby.
movie, though, isn't it?
No, it's not in the movie. It was real life. The real life
No, it's a
actor
different-
was harassing
it's a
people
different
in
movie
Hawaii
than this
for the
one.
past 2 years. They've been harassing people in Hawaii.
I'm talking about he's talking about a different movie now. He's not talking about Indiana Jones.
Yeah, he was talking about The Flash as well. Both those movies, which came out as summer blockbusters,
Oh, okay.
dive bombed. So, why did they both dive bomb? Because for The Flash, it's because Ezra Miller, the person who plays The Flash, is an asshole in real life, and nobody wanted to see them on the screen. So, anyways, on to this day in history.
Is that it? Yeah, interesting review. It seems like he just hated that movie before it even came out. People want to ask me. It's like, why are they doing that? Yeah, let me write a review. That's what it seems like. It's like, really?
It wasn't a review, it was analysis.
Oh, analysis or review? What's the difference?
The analysis is on the. They were analyzing the mechanism of Hollywood and why these films bombed, not the films themselves. I'm sure we can read a review somewhere else.
Key into the idea that Hollywood ran out of ideas 30 years ago. So that's the problem. They're making remakes of movies that should have made 2, maybe, definitely not 3, but now they're making like 5 and 6, and it's like, why? You develop these characters, you just put them in the same situation, nothing different's gonna happen. There's no metaphors, right? There's nothing. It's just them nakedly grabbing your cash to make the same movie over and over again. Okay, this day in history. Oh, and by the way, what is it? The Dial of Destiny? Is that the name of it? That reminds me of that Tenacious D movie, The Pick of Destiny.
Yeah.
Every time I see that ad, I was like, I think of Tenacious D, Pick of Destiny. So maybe that's
really
the problem.
messed up there. Yeah.
Yeah, they messed up. The Dial of Destiny, The Pick of Destiny. Okay, well, it's a Jack Black movie, I guess. 1415, Czech religious reformer John Hus, whose criticism of the church anticipated the Reformation by more than a century, was burned at the stake. 1415, when we used to burn people at the stake. Oh yeah. 1535, a little bit farther on in human history, English humanist and statesman Thomas More was beheaded for refusing to accept King Henry VIII as the head of the Church of England. So Thomas More, famous martyr, was martyred on this day. There you go. 1777, British General John Burgoyne captured Fort Ticonderoga from the Americans during the American Revolutions, and therefore giving us a name for our pencils. Ticonderoga pencils, by the way. That's a bit. Anyway, 1885, Louis Pasteur successfully tested the anti-rabies vaccine, and the world has been better ever since. 1907, Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, noted for intense, brilliantly colored self-portraits, was born. 1907. 1928, full-length, all-talking motion picture Lights of New York premiered in New York City. In 1946, George W. Bush, 43rd president, was born this day. 1957, with her defeat of Darlene Hard, American Althea Gibson became the first black tennis player to win the Wimbledon Singles Championship on this day in 1957. 1957, also on that day, while Paul McCartney met John Lennon for the first time at a church event in Liverpool, England, where the latter's band was performing. The duo would later form the Beatles, perhaps the most influential band in history. So on the exact same day that Althea Gibson was winning Wimbledon in England, somewhere else in England, John and Paul were meeting that very same day. Isn't that interesting? Nyasaland broke from British rule and became the independent country of Malawi within the Commonwealth of Nations on this day in 1946. Bosnian Serb forces began to attack Srebrenica, Bosnia and Herzegovina, ultimately killing more than 7,000 Bosniak Muslim boys and men. The massacre was the worst episode of mass murder in Europe since World War II, and this day in 1995. In 2002, John Frankenheimer, who's considered the most creatively gifted directors of the 50s and 60s, for his movies such as The Manchurian Candidate and Birdman of Alcatraz, died on this day, 2002. It doesn't say how old he was. That's kind of sad. American tennis player Serena Williams, on this day in 2002, defeated her own sister to win her first Wimbledon singles title on the same day.
Wow.
What is it? 45 years later after Althea Gibson. Isn't that interesting? Anne Frank, in sad news today. Anne Frank went into hiding on this day in Amsterdam in 1942, an experience documented in her diary, which became a classic war literature until her capture until August 4th in 1944. And, well, the rest is sad. Other birthdays today, John Paul Jones was born this day. John Paul Jones, famous Revolutionary American naval commander, not the bass player for Led Zeppelin. He did that later.
Okay.
Sylvester Stallone was born this day in 1946. Nursultan Nazarbayev, president of Kazakhstan, was born this day in 1940, and I hope I pronounced that right. And a happy birthday to the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama turns 88 today. He's born this day in 1935. Nancy Reagan, American First Lady, turns 102. And And those are the birthdays today. And what day is it? Short, only 3 days today. It's National Hand Roll Day, which is, the sushi
Okay.
thing. Yeah. Hand roll.
They call it a hand roll in English. Okay, I was like, I've never heard that. I think people just
you
call
roll
it
with your hand.
Yeah.
And you roll with your hand. So anyway, National Fried Chicken Day, which is easy. You fry a chicken. And it's International Kissing Day. So that's it. Those are the only 3 days of this today. Short, sweet, kissing your chicken, kissing your fried chicken, and your hand roll. That's it.
Well, this has been Allison here from the Netherlands, who only has fried fish, unfortunately, because it's Thursday and we have fresh fried fish here at the market. So that's what we get. But enjoy your fried chicken out there from me.
And Roger, sorry, stepped on you. Roger, United States, where the only thing cooking is me. So I can get some coolness on me. But so long till tomorrow. Be good to each other. And this is another episode of the comprehensive news of planet Earth. Today on July 26th.
26.
July 6th, 2023 edition of Before Coffee. So I can't. Be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notify buttons. And follow our other channels, Toxic Alley, History of Gravy, and Scratchy Old Records.